You just did some fantastic world building for your new urban fantasy book, and you sent it out to alpha readers, to beta readers, and then they email you back saying, that's not how you do this. This doesn't read right. Something in your world building is a little bit strange. This reads like military sci-fi, which makes no sense. Are you sure this isn't paranormal romance? What's going on here? Then you go, what am I missing? I get you. World building actually plays a huge role into figuring out the genre of your science fiction or fantasy story. And the kind of world building you use is actually crucial to making sure that that story works and it connects with the readers that you want to connect with. But the thing is, world building can be ridiculous to figure out in terms of genre because there is just so much going on in the science fiction and fantasy space, and it's always getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because, speculative fiction authors, we have awesome creative brains. We love to innovate. We love to try new things. And then we create new genre blends or new ideas. We get together with a bunch of authors and create a multi-author project. And then what is genre, right? What are we doing here? So if you want help to make sure that your world building is making sense with your science fiction and fantasy book and everything is coming together wonderfully well so that it will connect with the right readers that absolutely need it, make sure that you tune in for this episode of the Author Culture Podcast. Hey there, I am Janeen Ippolito, and I help authors think well, do well, and live well in a chaotic publishing world. And I love genre research. It is one of my favorite things to do. I love checking out genres and subgenres, especially in the science fiction and fantasy book world. Huge note about that. I ran a science fiction and fantasy publishing house for 7 years as a CEO, and one of my main areas was, besides being editor-in-chief, doing that high-level genre research as we chose different books to publish. And also as I work with authors as an author coach, marketing strategist, and editor, I dive into different kinds of genre research and everything. And that's one of my secret sauces I bring to the table and have done so over the last 7 years, is that whenever I take on a client, I deep dive into their genre and I figure out how their book is connecting with specific genres, where there might be new opportunities. And of course, I present them with a whole list of ideas where they can make the final mindful choices that they want to figure out where they want their book to hit in terms of the market, or where they just don't care, because there's some times when you actually want to go against a market trope for your own convictions, and that's absolutely legit. So I am super excited to dive into this whole discussion about genre research and about figuring out how genre research works with science fiction and fantasy world building. Now, first off, what is a genre? According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a genre is a category of artistic, musical, or literary composition characterized by a particular style, form, or content. So when you think about this in terms of book genres, a particular style might be that all steampunk books use gears and use a combination of sort of Victorian-esque technology, maybe with magic, maybe with not, maybe using electricity. And so the kind of story might differ, but the style, the aesthetic is going to remain the same. In terms of form, that's where we're going to talk about the plot choices, or the way that it's going to show up, maybe a cover design choice, or the setting, the specific setting, maybe the world building. And then in terms of content, we're going to be discussing and deep diving into that plot, character choices, all of those fun things. So these three areas, style, form, and content, are all defining what creates a kind of genre. Now, of course, the next question you'll probably have is, how are these things created anyway? Who's the one who decided that we needed to have mystery and that we needed to have romance genres? Who made those labels and then those sub-labels like paranormal romance and cozy mystery and cozy fantasy mystery with a little bit of romance and a talking cat, which is a very specific sub-genre, but is a thing? Who is deciding how all of this comes about? Let's talk. Genres are actually a combination of different kinds of cultural factors. So yay, we get to talk about culture. That means that we're talking about the economic need to sell books. So these publishers want to sell books, or these indie authors, they want to sell books. That's an economic need in the culture. They want to sell things. readers having a specific need from their books to buy them. So if you're a reader and you want something very thrilling, that's a specific need, a specific vibe that you're looking for. And you're not going to pull out your wallet until you decide that you get a book that's going to fulfill that need. Another factor in genre creation is readers having impacts on each other to enjoy these books. And we see this a lot with the advent of social media. And before that, we had things like book clubs, or like someone would read a book and then say, hey, I enjoyed this. Everyone else buy the book and let's have a book club. And those things still do happen in some cases, especially on online areas, or you would have some kind of big name celebrity or a talk show host like Oprah, or some kind of morning talk show host talk about their favorite books, and that would influence other people to buy them. You see this a lot now on social media, where people are influencing each other to buy books. And also, your own circle of friends might influence you to buy books or check into a book, even if it's not a genre you particularly love, if you have that trust of your friend, family member, etc. There can also be a crossover effect with other kinds of media. So if a certain kind of story is getting popular in movies or in TV shows, then publishers might go, I wonder if that's going to impact reader interest. And if they're going to want to read books like that, this is where we see things like novelizations of movies, where people said, okay, if we have the movie, can we hire an author to take the script, or can we just have the scriptwriter themselves novelize it, add more stuff to the script, add backgrounds and things, and then we can go back to the economic need. We can sell more of the overall content, the overall intellectual property, by selling it as a novel and not just as a movie. And so you can see certain kinds of media impacting other kinds of media in that way. Another way I've seen this happen most recently is with the advent of fairy tale retellings. There is actually a whole little category of Swan Lake retellings that ended up in the fairy tale category. But the thing is, a lot of these fairy tale retellings of Swan Lake are actually drawing a lot of their content and ideas and feels and vibes from the Tchaikovsky ballet Swan Lake. And so in that way, you see this popular ballet, which is one medium, influencing these different authors choosing to adapt the vibes and the storyline from that specific ballet into their retellings of a ballet. But then ballet retellings aren't really a subgenre. So they end up kind of putting it into the fairy tale retelling area, where it's a little bit of an odd fit, but hey, this is what happens sometimes. So summing this up, when we're talking about how genres are created, it is this combination of cultural factors, including an economic need to sell books. So you're going to try to figure out how to categorize things so that you can make it organized, so people can find it. Readers wanting a specific need from their books, and so they're specifically checking for books that give them cozy vibes or higher heat level vibes or adventurous space fantasy vibes, or etc. So they're going to ask for this genre, and if the publishers want to sell them that, then they might say, okay, we need to focus on the genre or make this genre a thing. You're going to see readers having impacts on each other, where they're influencing each other to read various kinds of books or create a demand for certain kinds of books, or maybe they're being influenced by, well, an influencer from the outside on social media or some kind of celebrity. And then, of course, you have this crossover effect of other kinds of media influencing the genre creation process. Or in other words, this whole process of genre creation and using genres is also that we have some kind of organized process, organized way of communication, so that a reader can find the kind of books they're looking for. A publisher or indie author can find that reader by saying, ooh, they're looking for this. Hey, I have your book. Come on over here. Let's hang out. You want this book. And distributors and retailers can create these different categories on their websites so that readers who are searching through that website can connect with those books and purchase them from the publisher or author through those books. And of course, the retailers and or online distributors take a cut. And again, we see the economic process coming in here. And there actually can be defined specific processes of kind of taking over new genres, and maybe a cohort of authors or even a publisher trying to kind of combine different genres together to make something different and new. You see this especially in the science fiction and fantasy genres. The Wild West of indie publishing has had enormous impact in this area, but I will talk about that more in a second, so make sure that you stay tuned. The trick with the science fiction and fantasy genres in particular is that these genres are especially defined by the world building. Now, world building could also be called setting. So if we're talking about things like, you're reading a small town cozy mystery. Well, that small town is your specific setting. And so if it's a small town cozy mystery, you better have a small town, or you're going to have a problem finding the readership for that. And so in all books, the setting, the place, the kind of choices you make about that, locations, how much time you spend in a location, which locations get more description than others, that's always a factor. But the thing with world building in science fiction and fantasy is that I would argue, above and beyond readers of most other genres, readers of science fiction and fantasy are especially looking for world building elements as a specific component of why they're reading the story. In a number of stories, the world building, that setting, it needs to be a good background element. It needs to definitely be there, and it needs to definitely work pretty well. But it doesn't need to be as specifically geared up in a certain way. It doesn't need to be something where the readers are going to say, hey, I want swag, I want a plushie created of this particular cat, or I want, wallpaper or special character art. That's not going to be as much of a factor. Whereas in science fiction and fantasy, that absolutely is a factor. And one reason for this is simply because in science fiction and fantasy, the authors are creating so much of their world building from their heads. So instead of just using a chair, they're creating what a chair looks like. They're making things look different and fresh and interesting. And so because of that, it's going to have a special connection with the reader. And of course, readers who don't really get all that world building stuff, and they're kind of like, well, that's weird. Why can't you just have a chair? Why can't you have this? Why do you need all the extra stuff? They're naturally going to say sci-fi and fantasy isn't quite for me, and that is okay. One of the genres that I see that this is similar to is in historical fiction. So in historical fiction, your readers are reading the fiction in part because they want that historical period. And they want it with varying levels of accuracy. There can be actually quite a huge demand for accuracy in historical fiction, which can cause some difficulties. And honestly, it's a reason why, even though I love to read it, and I have in fact edited it as well, I am kind of too scared to write it because I am that historical fiction reader who will Google things and go, oh, that's not accurate. And I don't want to deal with that as an author. Historical fiction authors, you guys take on an amazing level of stress and detail and accuracy. I salute you. I will stay in science fiction and fantasy where I can just make stuff up. But one of the commonalities between science fiction and fantasy and historical fiction is that in both cases, that place, that setting, those dynamics, those specific qualities of, again, what comprises a chair or clothing or etc., all of that becomes much more important and intentional to the story and is a reason why readers are showing up. And how this gets even more complicated, especially if you're a newer author to the science fiction and fantasy genre, or if you're going to switch between all the many science fiction and fantasy subgenres, is that the world building in a science fiction or fantasy subgenre changes and shows up in specific ways in specific subgenres. So if you write a vampire in a fantasy suspense book or a thriller book, it's going to look very different than a vampire in a paranormal romance book. And that's going to look different than if you try to do a vampire in a hard sci-fi book where odds are if you do something kind of vampiric, it's going to have a very science-based background. There's not going to be a sense of magic or dark curses or anything. It's going to look more like some kind of genetic disorder or disease. And so that one world building element of a vampire can show up very differently in different science fiction and fantasy subgenres and subgenres. And of course, it depends on the kind of story you're writing within that subgenre or subgenre. And so hence the reason why we are here discussing this. In addition, the level of world building can change by genre and subgenre. So often romantasy books, especially romantasy books that are more of not a low magic level, they're not quite so epic in scale, they have what some people have dubbed as wallpaper world building. So the world building is a little more of a background. It is a little more of okay, we have an elf, they have pointed ears, and they have this, and and it's a very kind of standard dynamic. And in fact, probably one of the most important things about that elf, especially if it is a male elf in this romantasy book, is that he is in fact attractive or attractively scarred. With romantasy, you're talking about romance and fantasy, so you're going to have some of those more genre romance stock ideas and tropes connecting with your fantasy world. And in Romancelandia and in Romance World, you're not going to see quite as much of the weird, strange innovation that you might see in a pure science or fantasy book, again, depending on the genre and the subgenres. So when these two things blend, you're going to have an impact on the world building and how it shows up, which is partly based on the readers. And these readers may be coming over from more genre romance who care more about the relationship of the characters and how those characters are interacting than all the crazy detailed amounts of world building you put in the book. And in addition, authors themselves can actually shift the tide of science fiction and fantasy subgenres by taking their concepts in their existing subgenre and moving into a new subgenre as a sort of, well, some people call it takeover. The idea being that, hey, my urban fantasy used to be more like hard-boiled thriller or paranormal noir, those kind of things. And now there's romance. And now there's like more of a heat level and such. What is going on here? This is not why I buy a book. And what happened is a bunch of the authors who wrote more of paranormal romance or who wrote more of just regular romance said, hey, I like urban fantasy concepts, but does it romance? And so they start writing in that genre. And readers who maybe didn't really want the urban fantasy without the romance suddenly start showing up and going, I like this with the romance. So let's do that. And maybe other authors get involved, and then it kind of can start creating this sort of grassroots genre shift that can actually be quite potent if there's that combination of the author doing a solid job executing the book according to their specific genre ideas and the readers going, ooh, we like this, we want more. And those two things kind of feed off each other. And so you have another sub-genre in that particular subgenre. And if you're kind of going, wow, this just got confusing already, consider yourself validated. It is challenging to figure out comp titles and to figure out connecting points, especially in science fiction and fantasy books. I warned you at the beginning. I see you. I know you. You're not crazy, because this particular genre of science fiction and fantasy just explodes with lots of subgenres that in fact are ready to become their own genres and are often referred to as their own genres. And so when anyone goes, oh yeah, that fantasy genre is just like, all one thing with dragons. And I go, oh, you have no idea. And for another example of sort of genre takeover, the steampunk aesthetic could almost be considered kind of an interesting genre takeover or blend of historical genres, especially from the Victorian era, which Victorian romance and Victorian mystery and all of that stuff, that is a thing. And then you bring in the steampunk aesthetic, you bring in this idea of optimism and this idea of retrofuturism, where you go back to the Victorian era where there was all these ideas with steam engines and electricity and everything. And then you decide to say, what if things happened differently? What if things happened in a different way? And that's where the steampunk subgenre can get really fun, because then you have variations of people who were like, you know what, I want to make it very historically accurate, but then also very carefully add those steampunk elements in, versus people who go, vampires, dragons, let's just have fun. And they're kind of on the other end of the steampunk genre, playing around with all the history and etc., and not really trying to be super accurate or even having their steampunk ideas and Victorian aesthetic take place on different worlds. I'm actually in the latter category. Again, I did mention that I am slightly fearful of writing historical fiction. So when I tackled steampunk, I said, we are going to a different world so that I don't have to worry about making this fit exactly with the history in any way, shape, or form, because that would kind of scare me. Part of choosing your genre and your story is understanding what you're excited about and what things evoke kind of a good, positive, I'm going to try this fear, and what things make you go, no, we're not doing that. And that's okay. I'm just going to let that go, and I'm going to go in this direction instead. Now that you've had your brain filled with all these amazing thoughts and ideas about the science fiction and fantasy genre, and hopefully have some new insight into why these two genres are actually so full of all this complexity and why it can take a lot more time to figure out your comp titles or figure out your marketing or etc., let's go into some specific takeaways that will help you to actually do the work of figuring out your genre so that you can more accurately categorize your book and tag things so that your book can connect with the readers who actually really want to read it. First of all, and I know you've heard this before, but it really bears repeating, Read books in your genre. And if you're not exactly sure what your genre is and what your subgenre is and your subgenre is, then go ahead and read books in what you think your subgenre is and then related books to that. And hopefully something will click there. And when I say read, if you can, read them all the way through. But guess what? I will not judge you if you actually get a Kindle Unlimited account or something and just skim them, or if you go and at least try to read the first 5 pages, or if you read summaries, or if you read descriptions of the books on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or etc. Just do some work to try to connect with books in your potential subgenre and subgenre and all the rest. This is really, really worth it. If at all possible, you can do it. Can you get around this? Well, sort of, kind of. If you choose a genre ahead of time and decide that your book is just going to fit right into that subgenre, like you're just going to go for a cozy paranormal romance with a cat and you're just going to write according to formula, you can do that. And then you'll actually lessen your stress on the other end. But that's if you want to really be very precise at the beginning and decide exactly what your book is going to say and what it's going to look like before you even write it, and then stick to that all the way through. If that's your thing, it will make it easier on the other side. But also, sometimes books just want to go in their own directions, and there is no judgment here if you're kind of at the other side of things and looking at your book and going, oh, yeah, that didn't happen. or I went into the whole writing process just to have fun, and now I'm trying to figure out where I fit. That's okay. But now you got to do the work of figuring out where things fit. In addition to reading books in your genre or subgenre or adjacent to your subgenre, you can also ask successful authors in your subgenre what kind of tropes or ideas or things fit into that subgenre. And when I say successful, I'm not especially saying an author who has 5,000 million reviews, although you can do that too. But often authors who have giant numbers of reviews aren't as easy to DM or get ideas from, which is legit. They're probably busy writing books. But look for authors who seem to noticeably be able to connect with their specific audience. Even if that audience is small, if they have an idea of how they're connecting with them and the readers are happy and you see that connection and you see that reliable thing in the reviews where the readers are going, yes, I was looking for this. Yes, this is awesome. Then that's a good sign that this author is successful at connecting with their desired readership and they have been able to carefully tag their book in the right subgenre. You can also, and I highly recommend this, ask readers of your subgenre. Go into Facebook reader groups and just lurk and listen to what the readers are saying. And when I say listen, I mean you're going to have to go to various posts and you're going to have to read all those comments. And if you're wondering, one of the ways that I do genre and subgenre and market research for my clients when I'm working on their edits or their strategy, I am going into groups, I am going onto different channels, and I am going through all of those comments and saying, okay, what's connecting with people? Now, the trick is people are going to have a broad range of different responses. So that's why you have to go through all of them and kind of figure out, okay, what's the majority saying? What's the minority saying? How's the data fitting together, etc. But this can be really helpful to help you see what readers are really expecting in that subgenre and that subgenre, and if that fits what you have in your book. One thing you can also do is you can read how-to books in your subgenre if they exist. So of course, there are going to be books called Romancing the Beats and things like that that tell you how to write a genre romance novel. And that's legit. I don't think there's a ton of super specific books on Amazon or anywhere else where it's like how to write, a steampunk adventure series with a dragon. Maybe. It's awfully specific. And a lot of times people who have that specialty are busy writing their steampunk adventure books with dragons. They're not specifically looking to write books to teach other people. They're too busy doing their own thing. Also, these how-to books can, of course, sometimes use generalizations or be a little bit inexact or those kind of things. And so you have to take it with a grain of salt. But if you can find how-to books, articles, etc., that do give some guidance about how to write in that subgenre, do the research and figure out if your book that you are writing or have already written fits some of those ideas. And as always, this process involves trial and error. It takes time. It takes effort. There's no real crazy shortcuts around that, although I am trying to create a few for you here if you're interested in that, which more about that in a second, so make sure you hang around to the end. But a lot of this just involves doing the Googling, doing the research, ask people, ask around, research the books, or if nothing else, hire someone to do some research for you and get things packaged up, someone who has experience in the area, so that you get reliable, thoughtful feedback so that you can make the choices you want. Because ultimately, the choice of what you put in your story and what you leave out of your story and who you try to market it to and what your story is communicating, that is up to you. And I am all for you connecting with your readers in your way for your specific purposes. And happy genre research. Make sure to leave a comment below on the YouTube video or else DM me if you're interested in more content geeking out about science fiction and fantasy genres, subgenres, subgenres, etc. I would absolutely love to do a series all about talking about specific subgenres, bringing on different authors who can share their experience and their thoughts about that, as well as other experts in the field, and helping you to really understand all of this so that you can do more awesome things with your book. So if that sounds great, please do leave me a comment below on YouTube, or else send me a DM or an email or etc. and give me ideas for what to do next. I am Janeen Ippolito, and I am so ready to go on a quest to help you figure out genres, comp titles, and all those fun things in science fiction and fantasy, genres, subgenres, subgenres, and all the rest. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Now go forth and be awesome.